Silence doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It just settles in, slowly, like something unfinished that never leaves the room. You don't wake up one day and say, "This hurts." You just notice that everything feels heavier than it should. Rejection is sharp. It stings, but it's clear. It gives you a moment you can point to. Silence doesn't do that. Silence stretches. It lingers. It keeps asking questions without ever answering them. You might not even talk about it out loud. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it's hard to explain a pain that never had words to begin with. Silence leaves you alone with what might have been said, with what could have happened, with what was never clarified. And that kind of absence can be exhausting. You keep replaying small moments. A tone shift, a pause that felt longer than usual, a message that never came, not because you want to suffer, but because your mind is trying to understand something that ended without telling you it was ending. If you feel tired in a way rest doesn't fix, this might be part of it. Silence keeps the nervous system alert, always waiting, always listening. Rejection closes a door, silence leaves it cracked, and part of you keeps walking past it, hoping to find something different each time. You might wonder why this affects you so deeply, why others seem to move on faster, why you still feel the weight of something that technically didn't happen. But silence is something. It removes clarity, it removes grounding, it removes the chance to make sense of the ending. And the human mind doesn't relax without context. When there's no explanation, your thoughts start filling the space. Not because you're weak, but because your mind is wired to complete patterns. You didn't lose someone loudly. You lost them quietly, and quiet losses don't come with rituals. No final conversation, no clear goodbye, so the body doesn't know when to stop holding on. You might catch yourself checking your phone, not obsessively, just automatically, as if part of you is still waiting for the story to continue. That waiting can feel confusing, even embarrassing. You might tell yourself you should be over it by now, that it shouldn't matter this much. But silence doesn't follow timelines. It doesn't respect logic. It settles wherever meaning was interrupted. And if you're someone who connects deeply, silence cuts deeper too. Not everyone feels this kind of pain. Some people detach easily. They close emotional doors without looking back. They need clear boundaries or nothing at all. But others notice subtleties. They sense when something shifts before it's named. They feel distance before it becomes visible. They register absence even when nothing is said. These people don't ignore unfinished connections. They carry them. So if silence hurts you more than rejection, it doesn't mean you're dramatic. It means you perceive what others overlook. You notice the gap where something used to be. You feel the missing weight of presence. And your system doesn't pretend nothing changed. Silence also has a way of turning pain inward. Instead of questioning the situation, you start questioning yourself. You replay your words, your timing, your tone. You ask things like, did I say too much? Did I expect too much? Did I imagine the closeness? But silence doesn't automatically mean you did something wrong. Often, it means the other person couldn't finish what they started. Not everyone knows how to close emotional loops. Some people disappear because confrontation feels heavier than vanishing. Others don't understand their own distance, so they explain nothing. That doesn't make them bad people, but it does leave a real impact. Silence hands you questions you never asked to hold. And the hardest part is that no one tells you when to stop waiting. There's no official ending, no clear signal, so part of you keeps holding space. Not because you're stuck, but because you're still looking for meaning. Waiting is a natural response to ambiguity. It's not a flaw. The mind searches for resolution the same way the body searches for balance. And when balance doesn't come, the tension stays. This kind of pain is quiet. You still function. You still show up. You still do what needs to be done. But there's an underlying ache. A sense of incompleteness. Something that mattered faded without explanation. And that can be harder to process than a clear rejection ever could be. Rejection tells you where you stand. Silence keeps moving the ground beneath you. If this resonates, there's nothing wrong with you for feeling it. You're not broken. You're not exaggerating. This pain doesn't happen to everyone. It tends to show up in people who truly connect, who don't skim the surface of relationships, who feel shifts instead of ignoring them, people who notice when something remains unfinished. And unfinished things weigh more than endings. Right now, you don't need to fix this feeling. You don't need to label it. You don't need to understand what it meant. You don't need to force closure. Sometimes the most gentle thing you can do is stop demanding answers from yourself. To quietly acknowledge, this hurts because it mattered. Silence hurts more than rejection because it keeps the story open. Open stories linger. They resurface unexpectedly. A song, a familiar place, a random moment of quiet, and suddenly you're back there again. Not because you're choosing to be, but because unresolved connections don't stay in the past. They float. There's no weakness in that. It simply means you were present. You noticed. You didn't numb yourself when things became unclear. For now, you don't have to solve the silence. You don't have to reach out. You don't have to pull away. You don't have to reinterpret every memory. You're allowed to rest inside the awareness that this pain didn't come from nothing. It came from connection, from attention, from feeling something real without a clear ending. Let that be enough for this moment. You don't need relief. You don't need clarity. You don't need resolution. Just notice that the weight you feel comes from something unfinished. And unfinished things take time to settle. You can stay here for a few moments longer. No pressure. No conclusions. Just breathing with the truth that silence hurts not because you're broken but because something meaningful was left without an ending. And that story is still quietly unfolding. Sometimes the pain shows up in quiet moments. When there's nothing demanding your attention. No noise. No distraction. That's when silence feels louder. You might be doing something ordinary. Driving. Standing in line. Washing dishes. And suddenly, the absence is there again. Not as a memory. Not as a thought you chose. Just a feeling that presses lightly, but persistently. Silence has a way of slipping past defenses. Because there's nothing to argue with. Nothing to respond to. Nothing to push away. It just exists. And when you've lived through a connection that ended without explanation, your body remembers even when your mind tries not to. You may notice that you don't miss the person exactly. You miss the sense of being met. Of being seen in a certain way. Silence takes that recognition away without warning. It doesn't say, this is over. It doesn't say, this change. It simply removes itself, and you're left noticing the echo. That echo can make you feel out of sync with the world. Like everyone else is moving forward while you're still standing in a pause. But pauses aren't empty. They're full of unfinished emotion. There's a reason this kind of pain doesn't respond well to advice. Because advice assumes there's a clear problem to solve. Silence isn't a problem, it's a gap, and gaps don't respond to logic. They respond to time, awareness, and gentleness. You may find yourself wanting to explain your feelings to someone, then stopping halfway through. Because how do you explain something that never fully happened? How do you describe missing clarity instead of missing a person? So you stay quiet about it. And that quiet can make the pain feel even more private, almost invisible, but invisible pain still weighs the same. Especially for people who feel things fully. People who don't skim through connections. People who notice tone, timing, and presence. People who sense when something is left hanging. If you're one of them, silence doesn't just hurt emotionally. It creates a kind of inner tension. A sense that something is unresolved and still asking for attention. Not loudly, just persistently. And it's okay to acknowledge that. You don't need to dramatize it. You don't need to justify it. You're allowed to admit that silence unsettles you. That not knowing where you stand is harder than knowing you were rejected. Rejection hurts once. Silence hurts in waves. Small ones. Unexpected ones. And each wave carries the same question beneath it. What happened here? You might never get a clear answer. And that uncertainty can feel uncomfortable to sit with. But discomfort doesn't mean something is wrong. It often means something mattered more than words could hold. Right now, you don't need to make peace with that. You don't need to transform it into growth or meaning. You can simply notice that your system is responding to something unfinished. And unfinished experiences take longer to settle. Some days will feel lighter. Other days, the silence will return without warning. That doesn't mean you're going backward. It means the story hasn't fully found its place yet. And you don't have to rush it there. For now, let yourself breathe inside this awareness. Not to fix it, not to understand it completely. Just to recognize that this pain didn't come from weakness. It came from presence, from paying attention, from not turning away when something felt real. And that, for this moment, is enough. You can sit here a little longer. No answers required, no decisions needed, just letting the silence be acknowledged, instead of carrying it alone. And maybe that's where a small amount of relief begins. Not in closure, not in resolution, but in being understood by yourself without pressure, without judgment. Just enough to feel a little less alone inside the quiet.